Good evening from New York. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Welcome to another edition. Those of you joining us for the first time, thank you for tuning in. I am going to bring on my guest this evening, New York State Senator Kevin Parker, and just jump right into it. The gentleman on the other side of the screen, the handsome Senator Kevin Parker. Good evening, Senator, and welcome to CWS Journeys.
Good evening, Selwyn. How you doing?
I am fine, thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. State Senator Kevin S. Parker is committed to restoring the overall quality of life for the constituents of the 24th Senatorial District in Brooklyn. A lifelong Brooklyn resident, Senator Parker has been a Flatbush resident for more than 31 years. Nurtured, educated, and employed in the borough, Senator Parker is intimately familiar with the needs of the 21st District, which consists of many diverse communities: Flatbush, East Flatbush, Midwood, Ditmas Park, Kensington, Windsor Terrace, and Park. So, Senator, I could spend all evening reading out this whole thing. But let me just start off by asking you, what do you find to be accurate with the way people close to you describe you?
Wow, that's a good question. I think most of the time, passionate, someone who tries to give a hand when it's needed, someone who tries to provide leadership in certain circumstances in which leadership is needed. I think that's probably the most important thing that you'll see.
I want to go down your timeline a little bit.
Okay.
Take us back to the 9-year-old and 15-year-old Kevin.
Okay, I'm just trying to leave it behind, but okay, here we go.
What was that? What was it like growing up at the ages of 9 and 15?
Well, I grew up. I made a big transition around when I was 9 years old, right? So I live now where I've grown up at, which is on Avenue H, right down the block from Brooklyn College. But we actually spent a lot of years in the Bushwick Projects. So I lived in 390 Bushwick Avenue. Till I was about 9 years old. When I was about 9, we moved from, this housing project with mostly Black and Latino people to Flatbush, which at the time was mostly white. We were the second Black family on the block, and I was going to PS 193, which is again right in the neighborhood. And I used to walk there. I used to get chased home every day. These boys used to take me home every single day. And so I think I was a very precocious kid. I used to read a lot. Very inquisitive. Always had a million questions. They used to call me Kevin the Menace because I used to be into everything. And I think my mother tried to keep me involved in as many activities as possible, just to kind of keep my young curiosity growing. So I took all kinds of lessons, piano lessons. I was in art classes, and now we're used to kids being overprogrammed. Yes. My mother was overprogramming me before the overprogramming was popular. And I think a little bit, as I look back, I think a lot of it was my mother living vicariously through me, because she had a very meager childhood, which she was one of 10 children. She was the second oldest of 10 children, so she really actually spent a lot of her time raising her brothers and sisters, and so that was a real I think struggle for her in Virginia. And they came up here, and she was almost an adult. I'm talking about by the time she was 12 years old, she was taking care of the entire family, including her oldest sister who had epilepsy and was very sick all the time. So again, you're talking about the 1940s, and epilepsy was a huge issue for folks then. So I think my mother, in raising me, her last of 5 children, was was trying to, like I said, live vicariously a little bit through me, but also trying to keep me kind of engaged. And so sometimes I talk to people, they're like, "Wow, you have all the experience, you know how to do all these different things." It's really because of my mother and her showing me, taking me to these classes and, insisting that I go to the opera and the Alvin Ailey and, plays and all kinds of things. My father was totally not into that kind of stuff, so his education of me was very different. But Yeah, that was the 90-year-old. I think by the time I was 15, I think it was very typical. Like, you know, sports was a really, really big thing when I was in high school. I was went to Millwood High School, so went to school right in the neighborhood, right here in Flatbush, with the Pierce 183, with the Huddy Junior High School, Huddy, Andres Huddy Junior High School 240, right on Nostrand Avenue, Avenue K. Went to Millwood High School, played football at Millwood, was on the track team, was captain of the track team, I think my senior year. Was, you know, involved in all the things at school, was in the drama club, in the band, in the orchestra. Again, the kind of same theme of kind of being overprogrammed. So like when you say to me earlier before we came on camera about like when you are rest and, you know, doing all these things, that's kind of, I'm high energy, so I always need more than one thing to do. Even when I'm at home, I'm never, you know, if I'm home watching the game, I'm not just watching the game. I'm always have to be doing something else. I just can't sit down. Even the movies, I love the movies, but it drives me crazy to be sitting there just watching the movie.
You just have to do things.
Yeah. So,
your mom, any words of wisdom from your parents, I should say, that still resonate with you today?
Oh, wow. I think my mom was less of a talker. I mean, don't get me wrong, she was a great conversationalist, but she wasn't kind of like the words of wisdom. She was more of a nagger. God rest her soul, I lost her 2 years ago, so I missed the nagging, but she was more of the, Kevin, did you do this? I don't think you should do this. Da, 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 da. She was my biggest political manager, and she watched the news all the time and was like, did you know this was happening? And you should be doing this. And I was like, okay, like, you know, Mom, I went to school for this. I think I know how to run a campaign. But she was my biggest cheerleader, my biggest booster. When it was petitioning time, she got more petitions than anybody. She raised more money than anybody. She gave more money than anybody. She really supported me in every way that a child could ever ask to be supported and loved. And my father was no less of a supporter of me, in a very different way, though. My father took care of things in the background that allowed me to be able to kind of follow my dream and do things. I mean, here I was, this kid that came from these two parents. My mother, again, from this very large family in Virginia. My father was orphaned. In the middle of the Depression, 1932, he was born in Harlem Hospital, an orphan. So here's a young black boy being born, without any parents around, and kind of made his own way in the world. And so he really, I think, taught me a lot about independence, about survival, about the responsibility. So if you ask me again, words of wisdom, my father had all the words of wisdom. So
when you are in the halls of the legislative authorities, I should say, and you are in the midst of similar minds, and you're trying to get certain things through. Who are you channeling in terms of when you talk in terms of your parents? Whose personality are you channeling when?
Absolutely my father.
Your father?
Absolutely my father. Mm-hmm. He was very gregarious, loquacious, extremely smart. I would love to be half as smart as he was. Very quick-witted. Everybody who met him loved him. And always had, like, again, the proper things to say. Always had, these kind of one-liners that he uses that I now have adopted from him. But going back to your previous question, one of the things he always said to me is that men don't have choices, men have responsibilities. And I think that wasn't about, men and women not having them. What more of it was about, if you're going to be a man, you really need to take your responsibilities seriously. And I hear that every single day of my life as it relates to him. But I think my ability to work on both sides of the aisle in the state senate, develop relationships with people, really comes from him, and the things that he passed on me, I think, both through nature and nurture.
When you broke the news to both of them that you were pursuing a political career.
Yeah.
What was the reaction like?
Wow, it was there were two parts to this, right? So I just told this one story earlier, which I think is kind of relevant to most people now, because I think we're the first generation, someone in our generation, that had as many choices as people of African descent here in America. And so, our parents, particularly my parents, weren't kind of used to that. My mother worked in one job. She worked at Brooklyn College for 42 years, right? My father worked for transit for MTA for almost 30 years. And so just, he had other jobs prior to that, but it was you got into a job, especially a good city or state job, and you stayed with it and got your pension and bought a house and took care of your family. That was kind of what they did. So when I graduated from college, my father wanted me to take the transit test. And we had a big fight because I was like, you didn't send me to Penn State for 4 years and go through everything I went through at Penn State and all the things you went through to sacrifice for me to go there, for me to go work for transit. If I could have gone to transit straight from high school, that's what I was going to do. Yeah. And so that was really, I think, rough for him, because I think he thought that I was being disrespectful of the thing that kind of fed us, and that really wasn't it at all, as much as it was me sacrificing at school in order to develop the skills and the relationships and all the things that I did in order to live my dream, because he never got to live his. And so that was like the kind of the first, first bout. And then I, quickly after that encounter, it was the biggest disagreement me and my father ever had. About 2 weeks later, I actually got a job working for the Pennsylvania State Legislature as an analyst. And so I moved to Pennsylvania for about a year and worked as an analyst there. And so came back to New York, had a number of jobs working in politics. And so when I came to them and said, I'm running for office, they laughed. They were like, we know you've been working for politicians. And at that point, I had worked for Una Clark in her first term as a city councilwoman, had worked for Assemblyman Nick Perry. Worked for Carl McCall as his deputy director of government affairs, but he was the state controller, and worked actually, believe it or not, on Hillary Clinton's campaign. I actually worked on, was a volunteer on her campaign for 2 years. So some of you who are older remember when Hillary Clinton was doing the listening tours. Yeah. Well, I was one of the people who organized those listening tours around the country, around the state of New York. In all 64 counties, and so. They knew that I was involved in politics. They had met Hillary, they had met Bill Clinton, all of those things. And so when I said I was running myself, this was just like beyond what they thought, I would do. But they were very, very supportive. My first run was in 2000. I ran for the city council. It was an open primary. It was 7 of us in the race. I came in 5th. But there was only about less than 200 votes between the person who won and the last person. In fact, that was only about, 135 votes from the person who won, which is like no votes, right? Very, very, very. Yeah. And when I remember, we were all broken up. My whole campaign, we were in tears, and we really thought we were going to win. And my father said that to me. He said, "You really thought you were going to win?" And it was just funny to me. He was super supportive of me, but it never dawned on me that he didn't actually believe that I would win the election. But he gave me money, he did everything, but he never thought I was going to win. And so it was just funny to me. I was just like, no, I really actually do know how to run a campaign.
How did that motivate you?
I don't think it was really much motivation, as much as a realization that my parents saw me in a particular paradigm. Now that I'm older, I think I really get it a lot more now, because for them, I was their baby boy. I'm the youngest, and I'm much younger than everybody else, right? So I'm 8 years younger than my next sibling, right? So my sister is 17. My sister was the oldest, is 17 years older than me. So for me, I'm the baby. So unfortunately, no matter, even though I'm about to be 50 years old, in my family, I'm still a baby, right? I'm a state senator, all this other stuff, but I'm still the youngest, right? So it's in my household, I still have a place that I occupy. So for them, I think it was just a matter of them not really seeing. And at the time, I was very young. I was 32 years old, so I was 31. So for them, I was still, again, a baby. I didn't think they really saw me. I think I was probably elected to the Senate. It was probably a number of years before they actually saw me like doing work as a senator, where they actually got that I was not just their little baby boy, but I actually was somebody of responsibility.
When did you first collide with this idea to get into politics?
All right, so I'll tell you the story my mother tells me, right? So my mother always, like, I remember this, one of my earliest memories. My mother always took me with her to go vote. And she would hold me up and she would let me pull the lever. And she would tell me who to vote for, and I would pull the lever for them. And so politics was always part of. My mother was really involved in church. First at Cornerstone Baptist Church, where her and my father went, and then later on at Vanderveer Park United Methodist Church, which is right here in the community. And when we moved here, my mother started taking me to that church because it was closer and it was easier for me on some days when she couldn't take me. I could go by myself. And so she was like the notion of service, the notion of politics. My mother went to high school with Mary Pinkett, who was the first black woman elected to the city council here in New York City, who represented the area in Crown Heights for a number of years. She went to Brooklyn College with Shirley Chisholm before Shirley Chisholm got. So she knew these people. She was never involved. She never worked on a campaign or other thing, but she was, always. She always voted. She was always like a really upstanding citizen. My mother was the kind of person that I remember coming home one time after she sent me to the store, and I had gotten too much change. And I said, "Look, my lady miscounted and gave me like $2 extra." My mother made me take the money back to the store. Right? She was that kind of person. And so, that was kind of a little bit, I guess, the backdrop of where the story then comes to. Is that when I was probably like 7 or 8, I was going to PS 193 and I was being bused from the Bushwick Projects to PS 193 again on Avenue L in Bedford, which is still a very Orthodox Jewish community. And so for me, everybody who I knew who was black or Puerto Rican all lived in the projects. My grandmother lived in the projects. Most of my family, I had one aunt who had her own house in Queens. Everybody else in my family lived in the projects. So for me, again, 7 or 8 years old, that's where we lived. So I said to her one day, according to her, that why do black people live in such bad conditions, right? And white people live in these really nice houses. And my mother said she didn't know, and so I told her that I was going to become president so that I could help change the way black people lived. And so my mother, in her infinite knowledge, says to me that, well, all presidents are lawyers. Thinking that even if I don't become the president, that at least she'll get a lawyer out of the deal. And so I never did go to law school, but I did hold on to this notion of serving. And so I told people, like, for me, being elected to the state senate is really a calling for me. It's not just a career or a job. This is really a call. I feel like the same way that ministers get called to their service in the ministry, that this is the way I serve my God and my community is through my service in the state senate.
You work for some public service. I'm going to go forward a little bit, right? I'm going to call some names and tell me exactly what comes to mind when I call these names. Right? So let's start with former New York State Controller H. Carl McCall.
Wow, impressive. I always tell people that most of us can't even carry his resume. Like, he's literally maybe in the country the most qualified person ever to run for office, and smart beyond belief. Went to Dartmouth, is an ordained minister, was a U.S. ambassador to the UN, was a senior vice president at Citibank, was a state senator in the 70s. The head of the New York City Board of Education when we still had a board a number of years. Just really, really well accomplished, and it was too bad he never became governor.
If there's one thing you learned from him, what would that be?
That the one thing more than anything else, he says you only need one skill in politics. He said you have to know how to count, and I say that all the time.
Count.
You have to know how to count. Yeah, because politics is ultimately about winning and losing elections. So we're just right now on the heels of the primary, presidential primary between Hillary and Bernie Sanders, and part of what you saw with the enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders is that people don't know, not that they don't know how to count, but they're not really counting the delegates. it's almost mathematically impossible, but really improbable that Bernie Sanders at this point could actually win the nomination. Before the loss in New York, he would have needed to win 68% of all the delegates going forward. It's just almost mathematically impossible. So it's just those kind of things you have to know how to count.
Former Manhattan Borough President Ruth Messenger.
Studious. She studied. She was one of the smartest people I've ever worked for. She taught me. One of the things that people always say to me is that they always impressed that I remember everybody's name. It's Ruth Messenger who taught me how to remember people's names. She impressed upon me that it was really important that you remember the people and that you remember the names and that at the end of the day that politics was about people.
Former New York City Council member Dr. Unitard.
Passionate. You're not going to be anybody more passionate than Unitard. She's very, very high energy. And it's funny, I worked on her first campaign. I used to drive her around, so I used to pick her up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take her to the train stop. This was on her campaign. And be with her all day. And by the end of the day, I would be Bush. And at the time, I was probably 23 or 24. And she, I'm not sure how old she was, but she was obviously a full-grown, like an adult. She had a PhD at that already. She was, children my age, and she would be going and going. And then they used to tease me because I'm African American, and she used to take me to this little West Indian restaurant, and she'd buy me this stuff that looked like sticks in a bottle, root tonic. She's like, "Here, drink this." And then people in the campaign used to tease me because I didn't know all the connotations of what root tonic was about. I was just like, she just said, "Drink this, is gonna give me energy." But she's very, very high energy to this moment, and I really and she is now that my mom's gone, she is my mother now, and takes care of me very good.
And last but not least, Assemblyman Nick Perry.
Committed. There is no one more committed to public service and to their community than Assemblyman Nick Perry. He taught me how to serve. How to serve. And how important it is to deal with each individual constituent, and not just I'm more Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer as senator, right? I'm more kind of big picture, big policy areas, academic, and Nick is more of Assemblyman Pothole, and there's just different styles. He's more like Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is really Assemblyman Pothole. You got a pothole that you need fixed, call him. Yeah. And he taught me really how to integrate that in the way that I wanted to serve, and to make sure that in the same way that I was thinking about the big issues that we're dealing with in the state, whether it's minimum wage or police violence, also thinking about the individual problems that each individual person who's coming to me has, and how you address those things.
Here you are, having been exposed to these 4 gems, these 4 amazing gems. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought, anytime, having worked with these people, that you should stay away from politics? Or they were like the catalyst, and you gotta do this, Kevin?
Yeah,
what was it like?
Yeah, it was never a stay away. I think that all of them taught me really valuable lessons, and made, again, this calling very real for me, and taught me, and when I say taught me, I don't mean that they necessarily all the time,
right,
said do this way or da. A lot of times it was just watching how they moved through the world, and how they spoke, and how they addressed issues, and how they engaged the community themselves, that became a model for how I now behave as a state senator with the community. And so, if nothing else, it actually deepened my appreciation, and then the ability to just kind of go places. Again, I'm here. I'm a kid from the project. I grew up in the Bushwick projects. I don't come from no auspicious beginnings. And I remember when the first week I worked for Ruth Messenger, for instance, we went to this house and met these people, and the person who answered the door was Mrs. Pell, and she said, she's telling me that this is the Pells. And I'm like, Pells? I don't know that name. She says, like the Pell Grant? Like, I never knew. I thought the Pell Grant was like from, was an acronym for something. It was actually the Pell family that actually developed this and gave the basis for this. And I met these people. Tony Randall, remember Tony Randall?
Yes.
He was at their house. He was a friend of theirs. Like, I've had so many just like amazing experiences. Ruth Messenger at the time, when Ruth Messenger was the Manhattan president, David Dinkins was the mayor. And so oftentimes they would talk, and so I remember a number of times literally having breakfast with David Dinkins in Gracie Mansion. And again, I'm like 22, 23 years old. Like, it was this amazing, right? And never think that, one of the times, like, this all happens, right? Like, your parents are trying to teach you how to, how to behave in company, right? And so they're like, take your elbows at the table, use your napkin, use the right fork. And you're like, whatever, like, this doesn't mean anything. It's like, one day you're going to have dinner with the president, and you don't never know, right? And then I remember, like, I actually did at one point have dinner with the president. And I was like, oh my God, like, do I use the right? Like, all the time, I'm like, your mother yelling at you at the table. I'm like, okay, now this is crunch time now. Like, this is it. And so it's been really amazing.
How did your loss the first time factor in to the victory?
Excellent question. So one of my political mentors is a gentleman named Dr. John Flatteau, who's a political operative here in Brooklyn. He actually now is one of the commissioners of the New York City Board of Elections, and I've known John for a number of years, and I always tell people I forced myself under John's wing. Like, I was like, this guy knows everything. He was chief of staff to David Dinkins when David Dinkins was mayor, and his deputy campaign manager, along with I don't know why I can't remember. I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Bill. I'll think of it in a second. But I went to John for a post-mortem after I lost the election, and he made me walk through everything that I did. He made me bring all my materials. He showed me I had to show him everything, and he made me walk through it, show him the plan, And he had been working with me a number of years prior to that, and he made me essentially do my own post-mortem on the election. And what it really taught me more than anything else is to trust myself and to know that I know what I know. We oftentimes we go through training and all kinds of experiences, and then when we get to certain places, we assume that everybody knows more than we do, because we think, well, we haven't done this before. But oftentimes you know far more than you really realize, and that's one of the things. It's a big thing in my office now, is my assistants, and not that I don't listen to advice, not that I don't take prodding, but I listen to myself first, and ultimately I know I have to be the one that makes decisions, and if I'm not comfortable with certain decisions, I don't acquiesce to them, because I trust my training, I trust my experience, I trust the guidance and the voices I hear from my ancestors to lead my feet in the right places.
You've been senator for some time.
Yes, 14 years.
What still surprises you about you today?
About me?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That I'm still not married. Yeah, you have a vision of your life, and I really thought that I would be married by now and have children and all those things. And I don't know, that's the biggest surprise to me. I just, I look back, I think that if there was anything that, and I think I've had an amazing life, and the things I've been doing are absolutely, just amazing. I mean, there's no other word to call it. But the only thing I feel like I should have addressed is creating more of a balance in between my personal life and my work life early on. Work-life balance. I tell people that all the time. People come to me all the time and ask me to mentor them, or people want to be in politics. And I tell them, I'm like, you have to create work-life balance. You have to. Because
have you been able to strike that balance?
It's hard. It's hard because, again, I kind of developed 25 years of work experience without having it, and so I'm trying to relearn new behaviors. Right.
When not senator, when Kevin is still, is quiet, is not worrying about the next bill or the last bill, who's he?
Wow. He is someone who loves sports. I'm always looking when I'm not looking at those things, So when it's just Kevin, I'm always looking for a distraction. I think being in public life is very stressful. It's not stressful in the way that people think. Like people think the paparazzi are following me around, and it's not that kind of stuff. No, and it's really even not in that next bill. It's really the individual problems that people have. People come in your office all the time, and they are victims of domestic violence. They've lost their job. They're in danger of losing their home, whether it's being, foreclosed on, or whether they're being evicted. You're dealing with people's real world problems, and so I think in my personal life, I just try to find escape from those kind of things. So I'm a sports fanatic. I'll watch paint dry if it's competitive. If they, I
got a question.
I really don't matter.
Now that you asked a question. If you had to go to your favorite place to relax, with your favorite thing to read, favorite drink, favorite music, where would this place be? What will you be drinking? What will you be reading? And what music will you be listening to?
Wow, I would be in Antigua.
Okay.
Or maybe in Barbuda on that pink sand beach there. And I would be drinking strawberry lemonade. I would be reading probably a comic book. I love comic books. I'm all into all of these movies now. Deadpool, X-Men, Superman versus Batman, all of this stuff. I love it. So I'd probably be reading that, and I'd probably be listening to Afro-Cuban music.
Nice. I want to take a quick break, but before I go, I want to ask you this question. The Senate Bill 235498, which ensures the remains of veterans are properly secured. Well, what was the motivation behind that?
It really was an attempt. We have a lot of veterans in our community, and I really had to it was part of a package of bills that I did around veterans because of the disemployment of soldiers from from Iraq and Afghanistan. We've gotten back almost about 45,000 veterans, most of which are Black and Latino, and are coming back with all kinds of issues. And so we're looking for a number of ways to deal with them. And somebody came to me with this bill because there are not ways. If you're a veteran and unfortunately you pass away, there's nobody to claim your remains. There are nonprofit veterans organizations that will actually give you a respectful burial, but the law does not necessarily allow either crematoriums or the funeral homes to turn over those ashes to these nonprofit organizations. And so this bill was an attempt to allow some of our fallen servicemen and women a chance to go into the next life with dignity.
Let's take a break.